Welcome to this week's episode of Being Human. I'm Richard Atton, and my guest today is Louis Fernandez. Louis is a former officer, an Army Ranger. He now teaches organizations to implement servant leadership. Louis, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Richard. I'm here at 4:30 in the morning in beautiful Tucson, Arizona, in my car. This is my my mobile sound booth, by the way, is what this is.
Yeah, it's incredibly good sound.
Yeah. I get great sound everywhere I go with this guy. So this is my recording studio. Yeah.
And is it a 4:30 start for you? This normal?
Yeah. So I got 3 little kids. Mine are 9, 7, and 5. And everyone has told me how fast they grow up. So I took the advice to heart and I try to spend as much time with them as possible in the evenings. And I also got really fat when I got out of the Army. So I had to find a spot to fit going to the gym. And yeah, so begrudgingly, I set my alarm for 4 a.m. and just so I can get out there and get some exercise in before I start my day.
Fantastic. I'm very, very impressed. Okay, so I mean, definitely the thing that drew me in is your background here. So maybe we should dive into that a little bit. Sure. Army Ranger, what does that mean for people who are not familiar with the military, and where did that begin for you, the life in the Army?
Yeah. So I was in college on September 11th, and I almost dropped out of college and joined the military. And pretty much everybody that was close to me told me not to. And there was a lot of people in my life that kind of made that difference. And then my grandfather, he's a refugee from Cuba, and came to the U.S. He was in his 30s, had 4 kids. Basically just the bag that they were allowed to bring, and kind of made a lot of sacrifices, worked 3 jobs, and created a life. So he called me and told me the story again. And by that point, I've heard the story a few times, right? But it's grandpa's, let's talk. And he finished the story, and he goes, you owe me. Like that was, because I went through this, and you're gonna finish college, and then you can go do the Army thing. I was like, okay, you're right, fine, I owe you. But I had these. I was a 19-year-old kid. I had these kind of visions of being the guy who catches Bin Laden, and I wanted to be an airborne ranger and do that. And I'm also afraid of heights, so that means you got to jump out of airplanes, and that was hard. And the hardest day for me in Ranger School, if you're good, you can get through Ranger School in like 67 days. So it's about 2 months. If you're like me and you talk a lot of trash, you got a big mouth, and you make stupid mistakes, it could take you a little bit longer. And so I had to redo the second. There's 3 phases. I had to redo the second phase. So it took me close to 90 days to get out of Ranger School and graduate. And then I went to the 82nd Airborne Division and was an officer there. Went to Afghanistan. Pretty interesting deployment. Went to Iraq with them as well, and did some counter weapons mass destruction stuff. So yeah, it was a heck of an experience, and it was good that I was single.
Right. Okay. Well, there's a lot in what you just said there. So yeah, just taking me to the 90 days. So what was it? What was it? Your mouth? You got in trouble with the officers there? Or?
Yeah. So I got in trouble, and there's 3 phases in Ranger School, and they're each 10, 15 days or so, and I got in trouble every single one. And yeah, it just one thing or another. It was different stuff, but the one that cost me an extra 30 days was just kind of an accident. You're sleep deprived and you're food deprived, and you're just put in this kind of state of you're in your worst mental state, right, and your worst physical state. I went in to Ranger School. I probably weighed about 190. I came out at 160 pounds. They feed you once a day, and you sleep 3 or 4 hours, and it's usually broken up, and the better you are, the more sleep you get and the more food you get. So I didn't get much sleep or food. And you have to tie everything down, and I gave some stuff to a guy to have him tie. You got to tie everything to yourself. You fall asleep standing up and walking around, and so if it's not tied to you, you'll lose it. And he didn't tie it down, and it was sitting there on the floor, and I kind of looked over, and the instructor was yelling, and they play these mental games, man, and that was probably the worst part of all of it, was just they get in your head, yeah, so they were like, "Oh, what's this right here? Oh, Rangers, we just leaving everything all over the woods, and I had to take responsibility for it. And so I had already racked up a few of these spot reports. It's like negative spot report, like you did something wrong, and I already had a few. But that day I racked up 3 of them in about 5 minutes, and then I had too many, so I had to go back and redo the phase and start over.
And so, what was it? And was it your stuff on the floor, or was it you not picking up the stuff of one of your fellow?
Yeah, so it was mine. I gave it to him, and I said, "Hey, you need to give it to somebody else," because they change roles every morning. And I guess he wasn't paying attention. Said, "Yeah, okay," and then set it down on the ground. And
Oh,
so
okay.
there was this pile of stuff just sitting on the ground, like somebody had just decided that I don't want to carry this, and just whoop, like threw it out there, like screw it. And yeah, and he looked at me, and I could tell he wasn't going to take responsibility for it. So I was like, "All right, I will." I didn't realize that at that moment I wasn't like in clear enough thought, which apparently he was, to say I'm not going to take responsibility for this. But I didn't want everybody to get punished for it, which I figured would happen. So instead, I got an extra 30 days in Ranger School.
Right.
So,
That's actually quite an interesting story, because I suppose my assumption might have been why you didn't get through was because you didn't pass some physical test, but actually it's more about your ability to take responsibility. It sounds like am I getting that right? Or?
Oh yeah, if you want to spin it to make me sound awesome, I'm down. Yeah, that works.
No, but it's an interesting facet of the training, right? That we kind of think of it as this hero's journey, and it's all about can you make it through the physical workload. But yeah,
sure.
It's a lot about your ability to stay responsible when you're sleep deprived, when you're food deprived.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. That's what makes Ranger School really because it's not a short thing. There's short things that are like that are just a physical challenge. And the first week of Ranger School is that way. They call it RAP week, Ranger Assessment Preparation Week. And in that first week, there's all just pass fail. You pass or you're done. And we started with over 300 guys in the first morning. And by the end of the first day, we were already down like 75 guys, like already. And by the end of that first week, I think we were down, probably a third of the class, if not more. And so it was just pass fail. But where you really kind of the rubber meets the road is when you are in that state where you haven't eaten, you haven't slept, and you're getting yelled at by somebody. You're trying to make decisions. So you're trying to make decisions because you're running these missions. So you run practice missions like as if you were in combat. So you're trying to run these missions, and you're trying to, the enemy's throwing stuff at you. They do this all the time. The guys you're fighting against, that's what they do for their job in the military, is they fight Ranger students. So they know the terrain, they know the mistakes people make, they know you're sleep deprived, and they're better, like they're physically rested, they're good, and so everything goes wrong, and it's at that point that you kind of like that's where you come away with that feeling of if I can make it through that, then when everything goes wrong in combat, where I'm not going to be as hungry or as sleep deprived. I know I can do this because I've already done it before. And that's where they call it the greatest leadership school. I'm not sure about that, but I will say that if you make it through that school, you have a certain level of resiliency, and that's kind of the takeaway. Like there's a person that doesn't quit. Like you can throw enough at them, they're not going to quit. I met a guy there one time. He had recycled every single phase, and he had spent something like 6 months in Ranger School. And I was like, dude, why haven't you quit yet? And he goes, well, at this point, I'm gonna graduate. Like I've already been here 6 months, And he's like, I will die before I leave here without my Ranger tab. And it stuck with me hearing that. That was that kind of level of commitment, and committing to goals in the same way and everywhere else, right? So my wife says I get too intense when I decide I'm going to do something, and she's like, oh, you've decided now, like, okay, so now like there's no stopping it, it's going to happen, and then that's, I guess that's something you kind of have, but then it's built in once you know that, I can do this if I push hard enough and if I stick with it, you think you have this limit, and then you get there and you're like, oh wow, I can go further. And then they take you further and you're like, oh wow, I can go further. And then they take you further and you're like, you know what? I don't know how far I can go. I just know it's pretty far because I don't really want to go much further to find out, like, like I'm pretty good right here. Like I feel like, hey, this is pretty strong. I'm not gonna keep going, but yeah. So anyway, I don't know where I was going with that,
but is that one of the biggest things you took out of it? Was that you're capable of something way beyond what you think you're capable of?
Yeah, absolutely, 100% for sure. Yeah, I realize that our bodies are incredible machines, and what they're capable of doing is well beyond what any of us think. What you think you can do, and you and I, you have the SMART goals in there. That's something you want to talk about, and that's one of the things that bothers me about SMART goals. Right, so specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-based. Realistic. Who knows what's realistic? That's what I learned in Ranger School. Like I had an idea of what was realistic, but I was wrong. I was wrong at what was realistic. Imagine going back and talking to Mark Zuckerberg 15 or 20 years ago or whatever, and he tells you, oh yeah, I'm gonna create this thing. It's where people can talk to each other, and I'm gonna be a billionaire off of it. I'm like, shut up, dude. That's not a realistic goal, right? What? You didn't know that it was a realistic goal, right? What is it? The Henry Ford quote where he says, "If I'd have given my customers what they wanted, they would have got a faster horse." Right? Try to describe. So people that are actually changing the world and making a difference and really achieving some awesome things, they don't bother themselves with what's realistic. They set a goal, and if it's unrealistic and it's crazy, that's what gets exciting. Like, oh, we can't do that. Okay, I want to do it now because you just said we can't, right? Like that's what gets me fired up. Yeah.
Yeah, I've definitely had that in my life. Some of the biggest motivators have been. But in fact, my PE, my physical instruction teacher, we call it physical education teacher in high school. He made a bet that I wouldn't pass the exams we have when we're 16 over here in the UK. And that was the biggest motivator for me to pass my exam.
Now you're going to ask yourself, did he know that was going to motivate you? Is that why he said it?
Well, who knows? God knows. Yeah. Quite probably, but it worked.
Yeah.
Yeah. So so you get through Ranger School, and again, your first deployment.
Yeah, so I graduated. I graduated Ranger School in December. I went to Airborne School in January, and then I got to the 82nd Airborne in February, and deployed to Afghanistan in March. And I was a platoon leader. I had 40-man infantry platoon, and we were in East Afghanistan in 2005. So if you've seen the movie Lone Survivor, or heard of Marcus Luttrell, maybe some of your folks in the audience might, but that was, a similar. I was just south of that and around the same time. So Mark Wahlberg plays a Navy SEAL who their team got caught out there, and pretty much everyone but him died. And one of the guys won a Medal of Honor, Lieutenant Michael Murphy. So it was a tough time, and so Afghanistan in 2005, Eastern Afghanistan, we were right along the Pakistani border. The enemy had figured out our rules of engagement that we weren't allowed to chase them in Pakistan, and yeah, so they would. I had a guy one time. God, it was the most frustrating day. He managed to get away. He was we got in this little brief firefight. I call it exchange of fire. So there's like a firefight where you're fighting with somebody for like 6 hours, 4 hours, or even 1 hour, right? It's a real fight. You're engaged, you're maneuvering, and then there's like the exchange of fire where you catch somebody by surprise, they shoot at you, you shoot back, and you kind of have this quick 1 or 2 minute thing, and then once somebody breaks contact, and that's what he did. He broke contact and ran in Pakistan. And he was running for a while, and we had to stop chasing him. And then he stopped and he turned around and looked at us on this mountain and he waved. And oh man, I was so angry. You know, there was like three of us trying to hit him, and he was just too far away. He was like 800 meters away. He was like, man, my rifle just can't quite touch him out there, and yeah, it's different, man. He was too far away. He was too small of a target, and he knew we couldn't chase him. So, but so coming in from Pakistan, they'd run missions in Afghanistan, or they'd run supplies and drugs and weapons or the like, and then they'd go back across the border and do their resupply again. And we position ourselves right in kind of the main avenue of entry, and yeah, so it was quite a. They didn't like that, so they wanted us out of there.
Right. And then you're very powerfully right about it on your blog about this one evening where you think there's rain on the roof of the place you're staying, right?
Oh yeah. So that was December 22nd. So we had already been in country, a while, and we had done quite a bit of damage to their ability to maneuver. And it's we're at probably 6,000 or 7,000 feet. So I mean, it's cold. There's snow on the ground. It's Christmas time. There's little Christmas decorations everywhere, and by this point, I had gotten more relaxed. I slept in a brown t-shirt and shorts. It was kind of comfortable, but I kept everything ready to go. And I don't remember what time it was, but it felt like it was like 1 or 2 in the morning. I was in the deep sleep, and we slept in these kind of metal, or not metal, but concrete buildings, and they had metal roofs. And then in between the metal and and where we slept, they had laid out sandbags, because we would get actually, it wasn't bullets, usually it was rockets, so there was a lot of rocket and mortar fire. And the door flies open, and one of my sergeants came in, and he's yelling. He's like, the base is under attack. And he runs to his cot, and getting up out of the sleep, I'm kind of rubbing the sleep out of my eyes, and I'm walking to the door, and I'm thinking to myself, there are two thoughts. One is, I don't hear the major rocket explosions, because usually when a rocket comes in, uh, it's an event, and it sounded like it was raining, and I was like, man, it's too cold, like there's snow on the ground, this rain doesn't make sense. And they have this metal door, and I open the metal door, and all I see is tracer rounds right outside the door. And then instantly I'm awake. I was in this kind of like one eye open kind of, and then boom, like awake. The body just discharges that adrenaline, and it's like, okay, it's go time. And I spun around, I flicked on the light of our room. We had about 16 guys in this one room that we all slept in. And I was like, direct contact, let's go. And that meant, this isn't indirect, this is guys shooting. And so this is all the information I have at this point of what's going on. I don't know how many there are or where they are. I don't know if they're inside the base or outside the base. I don't know. I don't know what's going on. And, I put my feet in my boots, pull the laces tight, shove the laces in the side, throw, I don't know if I think I put a sweater on because I knew it was cold. So I threw this jacket, zipped it up, threw my body armor on, put my night vision on, and I went out the door. And I slept right in front of the door. So I was the first guy out the door. And so I come out of the door, and I'm trying to hug this building as much as I can, because I mean the tracers are just coming down, and there's thousands of them. I mean it looked like raining bullets, and then I could see the rocks spattering, and So I'm trying to get an assessment of what's going on, see what what's going on in our base, and I could hear this AK firing, and there's an actual different sound between the M4 and the AK, and it's kind of a distinguishable sound. And so it was right around the corner of the building, and so it was like, okay, this is where they are. They're right there, and they're making their attack. And this is my mind. So I'm kind of making my way down, and I had a monocular night vision. Some guys have the two. Mine was just one, and I did that on purpose so that I could see down because I tripped a lot, and I was never really good at looking down at the ground as I walked. I fell so many times, all the time. And by the way, if Hollywood movies, that's what they miss. Like, I'd like to see one, a firefighter in Hollywood where somebody trips and hits the ground and everybody laughs at him, and then he gets up and keeps going again, because that's like all the time. Anyway, so I see some movement, and I look over, and it was kind of interesting because he did the same thing I did, and I had a pressure switch, my infrared laser, and I hit it and I put it on him, and I looked down and I have a laser on me too, and it was like that was the way we recognized, like, oh, that's a good guy. Like, we were trained on each other, with our weapons. Like, oh, okay, we're on the same side. Like, thumbs up. Like, thanks for not shooting me, buddy. Keep going. And as I approached the corner, it was one of those, like, okay, this is it. Like, the invading horde is around the corner of this building, and I'm about to face them. And I could hear my guys pouring out of the building, and I was like, okay, so I got the first few shots, and then everybody's gonna be behind me, and we're gonna see what we find out when I get around this corner. And took a quick breath, and just and then went, and I'm coming around the corner. I flipping the selector from safe to semi. My fingers falling on the trigger. Pressure switch goes on. I'm center mass on this target. I've identified the AK fire, and it just stopped. It was an Afghan soldier that was on our base who was not in his designated position, with his eyes closed, his weapon over his head, and he's just like firing his thing like mindlessly over this wall. Like, dude, you've no idea how close you got to getting shot. You're like, you're doing everything wrong. And so we get back up, and what's interesting, and I think the post you're talking about was talking about delegation, and delegating authority to make decisions, and everybody that night at this point in the fight is experiencing the same thing that I am. We have no information, no idea what's going on, and we just got to make decisions about what we're going to do. And as a leader, you got to have, our commander had to give us that authority to make that call. He couldn't be out there and telling everybody what to do. And within minutes, what was interesting is we manned our walls. We got our machine guns up and going. We got vehicles that had heavy machine guns going. The mortar team got out there and they started firing their mortars. And it was just kind of this chaos. It's what started as chaos brewed organization. And then we started to figure out, okay, I've got this section, you've got that section. Does anybody have this over here? And we're doing this kind of like cross coordination, talking to each other, figuring out what's going on with the other guys, and developing this picture of the battlefield, just on our own. Like this is just kind of how things went. And at the same time, the commander's in there and he's pulling in assets, getting aircraft coming, additional assets and force multipliers, and it was through that kind of lack of control that made our fight so powerful. And within less than an hour after that fight had started, and so we were a base about 100 guys, and they brought over 300 men. I mean, the when I finally got on the wall and I could see what was going on, it was hundreds of tracer fire or of muzzle flashes all along this mountain. So we were like up against the mountain, and it was just all you could see. It was just everywhere, all these little flashes all over the place, and that was kind of like, wow, that's a lot of dudes. Like, that doesn't typically happen in combat in the 21st century. 300 versus 100 shooting at each other. Like that is, I don't know anybody else that has had like that kind of massive force on force, battalion size elements fighting each other type thing. And it's one of those, like, you don't really train for that either, so it's just kind of figure it out. And but there was 82nd Airborne paratroopers and Green Berets on that base. Those are not the dudes that you want to mess with. So I was very lucky to be surrounded by those guys that day, and yeah, we repelled them and did a lot of damage pretty quickly. So kind of having that decentralized command makes you really effective, and that your subordinate leaders understand that they have the authority to make decisions, right? If I know that I can make a call and it's a moment and I don't have time to go to the boss, but he has built that relationship with me, and I know that he's going to back me up, and I'm just making the decision that the best I can with the information I have in this moment. And so if you empower people to do that, then you can react quickly to these ambiguous situations. And even when you're outnumbered 3-1 by this massive force, and you're woken up in the middle of the night and have no idea what's going on, they still can't win because you've delegated the ability. Now the responsibility is still yours as leader. So if that had gone to crap, it's still on our commander, what could you have done differently type thing. So you still have the responsibility as the leader, but you delegate the authority to make the decision. And that's a very, very powerful tool.
Yeah. Interesting there, you used the term subordinate leaders, not subordinates, but subordinate leaders. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if you've come across Turn the Ship Around by David Marquette, who
No.
He led one of the US Marines. Yeah.
Yeah. He actually he spoke. Oh, no, Turn the Ship Around. Oh, that's a different one. I know a guy who wrote It's Your Ship.
Okay.
But
he talks about the leader culture, and it just reminded me. Yeah. So and each of these little groups were being led, right, and the coordination between them. It's not just these guys going out and like being autonomous and organizing themselves. It sounds like they're in constant coordination with the other groups, right?
Yeah. So you start to kind of figure out what's going on, and in the airborne we call it the LGOP, the little groups of paratroopers. And the little groups of paratroopers,
which sounds kind of cute, but I'm guessing they're not that cute.
It's great stories in World War II. These guys that they got scattered and they were all over the countryside, and so Himmler's getting reports of all of these firefights happening everywhere, and he's thinking to himself, the size of airborne element to him must have been a lot bigger because of all of the interdiction and combat and everything that was going on everywhere. And it was just these little groups of dudes, and 4 or 5 guys that are like, all right, let's go, let's do this. I'm like, oh, we're surrounded. Like, we're paratroopers. We're supposed to be surrounded. Like that's the design of this methodology. Let's go do this, and that's just, I understand the mission. I get the intent. I have the authority to make decisions, and I'm going to execute. And so then you start to get these kind of slow coordination effects. Like, hey, I've got my group, you got your group. Let's put them together, and now we got a bigger one. And then it just kind of like that snake game. You start with just one little guy, and every time you pick up a dot, the snake gets bigger. And that's kind of how it is. It's just making this bigger, and yeah. So it's a really neat thing to see when people are given. People get creative, and when you let people be creative, they will surprise you with how awesome the ideas that they come up with are.
Right, and I was reflecting on this. I've spoken to a few people now with military backgrounds on this show, and it always surprises me the reality of sort of the military management culture and our stereotype of it. We think about these command and control environments, and yet you're talking about creativity, you're talking about independent leadership and autonomy, right? And as you say, you gave one command, right? Direct fire, let's go, and then it all emerged from there, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's true. I hadn't even thought about that. Yeah, yeah, and you get a lot of that. So there is also a lot of discipline, right? So you get a lot of discipline, you get a lot of training, you get a lot of kind of. Sometimes it's like, man, these tasks are so mundane and repetitive, But what happens is when you do those little things right, and you focus on them, when you have a big problem, you don't have to focus on the little things because you've done it right, and you build like the muscle memory and the habit of doing things a certain way that you don't even think about it. I drive my car and I'm not really thinking about it. I can have a conversation or, I, it's all these little things and it only comes into play when something weird happens. There's a tree in the road or something, then all of a sudden my mind goes, okay, let's focus on the task. Um, but even then, I still don't have to think about, clutch, gear. I'm not thinking about that. That's happening, and that's so you do get the discipline thing. But yeah, the effective leadership, especially, and I think the stereotype comes out because you see like the basic training thing, right? And that basic training is that way. I mean, it's in your face, kind of, do the push up and raw, like that's how it is. Okay, the point is you get broken down and then you get built back up and then you get taken, like I said, to those levels that you didn't, so you realize, okay, I can go far, right? So that's the point, is that you come out of there with a sense of confidence and discipline and service to, selfless service in the army is one of the key principles and uh, I don't know, it's not motto. What's the word I'm looking for? Anyway, it's a loyalty,
Hmm.
duty, respect, selfless service. Anyway, uh, values. Thank you. Yeah, that's the word. Great job, man, and helping me come up with that. So one of the key values, selfless service. So you really pushing that kind of servant attitude, and so if you approach leadership the same way, and you realize, I was in a position just a little while ago that dude is in, and the other thing is in the infantry, if I'm gonna ask somebody to, if I say let's go and I go out that door and they don't trust me, I'm all by myself. You know, I don't want to be alone. I want all them 30 guys to come out that door behind me. And so, if the only way you do that is by building those relationships and building that trust, and letting them know that that you care about them, that what they value matters to you as well. That's how, when I say let's go, that I feel like that's all I have to say to them, and I don't have to say, hey, grab your gear, put it on. You know, I don't care if you wear pants or not. Don't worry about socks. Make sure you've got something, or I'll, if you don't have anything cold to put on, that's, or warm to put on, that's okay. I'll send you back in later. Make sure, don't forget your ammunition. Check the battery on your night. Like, no, let's go. Like all of that other stuff. That's all just kind of implied with the task. So,
Right, and yeah, I think this is a really important point you're making, is that we can sort of wish for empowerment and these teams that can just kind of get on with it with minimal direction, but you've got to back it up with the training. These people have got to be skilled, they've got to know what they're doing, they've got to be drilled. That's a really important point.
well, and I've done it also in the civilian world. I worked for Fortune 100, and we had, I was bringing new products to market, and there was a product that we knew there was a need, we knew there was an opportunity in the marketplace. Our competitors owned that space, um, but we couldn't ever get the return on the investment to work because it was a low cost item, and I decided I wanted to take that program on, and everybody kind of told me, like, it's not possible, and I kind of came up with a plan, but the thing was, when I sat down with the team, it was, I need, we're gonna do this. How can we do this? What are your great ideas? What are some of the ways? And I never. It was just, okay. You want to do this? We sat down. Basically, what we did is we took a machine and we tore it apart and decided, what do we really need? What's cosmetic? If it was cosmetic, it was gone. It was just, we were ripping parts off of this machine. And, the engineer I was working with, he was kind of like, I've never done anything like this before. I was like, well, this machine, this product. I, I'm not going to come down here and tell you how this needs to be or look or whatever. You know it better than I do. So, let's do this. And just giving him the freedom to make those decisions and make the calls and have the marketing guy come in there and be the customer voice. And, so we made it happen. Not only did we make it happen, but it had one of the highest returns for the entire factory for that year of all of the products that we came out. And the CEO of the company came out to talk to us, say, this was an amazing thing that you guys did. And it was all done based on, giving people freedom and changing the way we looked at a problem, and delegating and authority and not micromanaging it and just, let's go. Like, we're gonna do this. Let's go. How are we gonna do this? So it can be done and it can be effective.
Right. And is that, in essence, is that what you're describing there? Is that servant leadership? Is that now what you take out to your clients? Or?
Yeah. So you have to. I joke that it's like the Mr. Miyagi, the wax on, wax off, right? So Daniel is doing this thing and he's like, this is a waste of time, and then he realizes, oh shoot, I can block, right? Yeah. So not really an effective block, by the way. If we're talking like hand to hand, the Karate Kid is not the way to go, but it's a great way to show, when you build habits and how they can be effective. So the servant leader is going to be somebody who realizes the position that they're in as the leader is not one of self-aggrandizement. It's one of servitude to the people. The only reason your leadership position exists is to make the job of the person who's adding value to be able to do their job. So if you're in manufacturing, you're taking bare steel and then somebody adds value to that and creates a part, and then somebody else adds more value and puts it on a machine, right? Okay, you could do without a leader. You can't do without the welder and the machinist and, the brake operator, the laser operator, the assembler, the painter. Like, you can't create the product without those people. You can create it without the leader. You'd be less effective, but you can do it, right? So if you approach the position that way, like, okay, so as the leader, my job is to make sure that I take away all the obstacles possible for those people to do their job, and your mindset is such, then all the side conversations that you're going to have, you're always approaching them in that way. So and we build kind of the habit. Some people aren't very comfortable having these conversations, so I teach you to say thank you. It's not just thank you. It's, Richard, you reached out to me after our email. We talked a little bit and you took the time, you went out of your way for the schedule that works best for me. And I appreciate that. Now you're helping me get a message out that I think is valuable, and that means a lot to me. Now that's true, but it's also, that's how we thank people, right? It's not just a walk by, like, thank you. I've seen it before that, thank you. And I was working with a guy and he's like, oh, he must have just gone through one of those emotional intelligence classes. Now he's walking around saying thank you to everybody. Like, everybody knows it's crap. It's disingenuous, Like, well, let's be honest about, how something makes us feel. Praising people, serving people. You've got a parking spot and somebody, maybe somebody's been injured recently and they're walking around in crutches, and you're the leader with a parking spot. Give them your parking spot till they are off crutches. That goes. Now, after you do something like that, this is just an example. You do something like that and go fast forward 6 months and you ask that guy to go out of his way for you. Of course he's going to do it, right? Because he knows you go out of your way for him, right? And so that kind of stuff, when you're doing this regularly, then you can ask your teams to do more extreme things. Like the team I was talking about with the project. When I came up to them and said, hey, we're going to do this project in 6 months and we're not going to test this equipment. That never been done before with this company. Like, everybody just kind of like, what? Like, we can't do that. Like, yes, we can. And we're going to. And then finally it was like, okay, let's do it. Let's try it. Right. But it was only possible because the relationships had been built. So if you don't do that, you can't ask people, I'm sure you or somebody listening to this has worked for a terrible boss. Somebody just makes you miserable. You don't go out of your way. You do just enough to keep them off your back, and no more than that. And you're watching that clock, and the moment your time is up, you're out of there, right? So it's just enough, the bare minimum. That's what you're going to get out of people when you're that kind of like in their face all the time. And hey, what are you stopping for? You could sleep when you're dead. Nobody wants to work for that guy, so nobody's going to give you that extra, that creativity, whatever. But if you have a person who's going to go out of their way for you, who genuinely cares, who has these regular one-on-ones, who, remembers things about you and your family and asks you how, what's important to you and what do you do when you're outside of work, and so you feel that kind of connection, like this person actually cares, and that person comes to you and says, hey, I want to do this crazy thing, will you join me in doing this crazy thing? And be like, yeah, let's do this crazy thing. I want to do something no one's ever done before. Yeah, let's do it, and then you get like this massive creativity, these massive things are like projects that have been sitting on the shelf for 3 years and no one's ever been able to get, and the team is like totally demoralized. And then all of a sudden, I show up, and 18 months later, the product is in customer hands. You know, after it's sat on the shelf for 3 months, and the team is like, "Dude, I want to work with your team. I want to be on your team. Hey, you got any more room to be on the team? Like, let's do this. Let's do this crazy thing. We're making difference. We're doing things." You get there by that building those relationships, and this is coming from a dude. I know people are like, "Oh, I'm not into that like soft, hand holding. I'm too quick for that, right?" Like, bro, I led a bunch of dudes, and I'm pretty sure you wouldn't call any of them soft, okay? And this is how we did it, right? It was by building those relationships, and yeah, we hugged each other and cried sometimes, okay? You know, uh, but those were pretty badass dudes. So it worked, and I just wish more people would do it. I don't know. So that's what I'm on a mission to do, and to train more people how to do that, and really get the change the culture of leadership just overall. And like the 21st century and technology, I can be in many places at one time and create this online program that you can train 1,000, 5,000, 15,000 people all in the same day, without getting in the way of your work.
Right, and that comes up on your blog as well. This the problem with leadership training. So yeah, tell us about that.
Yeah, it's this. You go to a 3-day. Okay, you're really getting me going here, man. So, say you want to be a cage fighter. You want to fight Conor McGregor. Okay, and I say, great, man. You want to be a cage fighter? Here's what Conor does. I'm going to take you and I'm going to put you in a 3-day training plan. I'm going to give you some PowerPoint presentations on what fighting looks like, the different positions, and then we're going to do some soft rolling. Kind of, we won't really hit each other hard. Just kind of show you what the punches look like, and then at the end of that, you're going to go get in a cage with Conor McGregor. Would you do that? Of course not. Like, I'm going to get murdered, dude. What are you talking about? That's not how you train to fight, right? Like, you got to get out there and you got to train. It's years and years and years, and it's practice and it's habits, and, to get to that level. But to even get out there and fight, and even at the, just kind of like the sport level, right? It's, you got to have those habits. You got to train for a long time. You got to build that kind of stuff so you understand, oh, I can feel his body shifting, and I can tell he's going to try and get this choke, and oh, there's an opportunity to get that arm bar, all of these things. You get that from the repetition and the feeling, and you look at people that train jujitsu, right? There's a difference between a white belt and a blue belt and a purple and a brown and a black, right? There's a difference there, and every one of them knows the same move. Well, maybe not the white belt, but after that, everybody knows the same moves. Like, they all know the moves, but there's a difference in the nuance and in the levels, and how you do that. So a 3-day training exercise or a 5-day training exercise where I just give you a bunch of workbooks and information and all of this stuff, and you've been gone for a week, and then you get back to the office and you got 400 emails in your inbox and all these fires you got to fill, and you're taking care of all this stuff, and you're pulling out your hair. You can't figure it out, and it takes you a week and a half to get caught up. Now you don't remember anything you learned in the class anyway. And the only way you deal with these ambiguous situations is going back to your old habits in the first place. So you're, as a company, you're spending $2,500, $3,000 to put somebody through training that doesn't give you any results whatsoever, right? So my program, what I decided was, we need to do something that's going to go over a long period of time. I'm going to give you a little bit of information, and we're going to just build on it. And I'll give you one task, and I'll say, hey, today go work on this thing. Or today go thank somebody, and I'll tell you how to do it. Or go praise somebody. Go serve somebody. Today contact somebody that cares about you, that you care about. These kinds of little things, and we build on that, so that at the end of 4 months, you've been doing this for a long time, and it starts. We've not only built the habit, but we've kind of solidified it too. We've gone a little bit further, and we've given you some challenges, and you're still doing your job every day, and then you're out there in the actual thing. This is a full speed roll with somebody, right? So I show you how to do the arm bar. Now go do it on each other, and then you're going and you're doing it on it. And so, that's the intent, to have an effective plan actually delivers the results, because that's what you're looking for. It's the whole reason you're sending people to the training in the first place.
Right. And so, and it's this daily practice, which of course we know is really how you shift.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I get that. The other thing that piqued my interest, and I've definitely had this with clients, and it's a major issue, right? The toxic employee. You talk about that.
Yeah.
How do we handle them?
So, yeah, how do you handle them? I'm not sure that I've been very effective in my technique. So, remember how I said I got in trouble in Ranger School all the time? So I will confront the toxic person. And that's not always the best methodology. I don't know. I guess my thing is that I have told a toxic boss or two in the past. I had one ask me outright, how do you think I'm doing as a boss? And I stopped and I said, you shouldn't ask me a question that you're not prepared to have an answer. And this person kind of sat back and said, no, I want an honest answer. It's like, are you sure? And yeah, so I laid it out, and it was hard to, I was nervous too, laying it out there. But no, so the way I think it's important for I'm talking now managers of managers, right? This is your responsibility, is to have these regular one-on-one conversations with the people 1 level and 2 levels below you, so that you can identify these toxic people, and you got to root them out. Because I talked earlier about how people are only doing the bare minimum, right? So creativity is gone. These people, they cause higher rates of injury. There's lower productivity. There's lower quality. Your turnover rates. See, this is another one that'll let you know whether or not you have a toxic environment. Is you can look at what is the turnover rate. If you have a lot of people leaving a certain group, you got a toxic leader. Like, get rid of that person. Turnover costs a ton of money. If you're hiring people that make $100,000 or more, it'll cost you $200,000 to replace that person. And if you've got a leader who's managing a team of folks that are like that, and you've had to replace 10 of them, you just spent $2 million on this individual. You wasted it. $2 million. Like, what else could you have done with that money that you just wasted on this individual? And we're hesitant to pull the trigger. Like, get them out. You maybe don't need to fire them, because you can't fire them, but put them somewhere else and let them know they're on a plan to fix themselves, because they're toxic, because they're destroying your organization. I mean, the bad leadership costs our economy billions of dollars a year, and it's sad, and sometimes, I don't know about you, but I've wondered, like, how does that person get into that position, and how are they still in it? And I think I think in the article you mentioned, I talk about how toxic people tend to be good individual performers.
Right, you say that.
Yeah, so
and very good at facing upwards, at pleasing their bosses. I think that's how they stay there. They're great individual contributors, and they're great at showing a great performance, or demonstrating great performance to the people above.
Exactly. So that's why you have to do those conversations, those one-on-ones, and you have to do them 2 levels down. And I gave some questions in that blog about how to test if somebody's toxic. Give them praise, see if they give anybody else praise. Ask them to talk about people that are at their same level, Is it all negative feedback that they want? Like, are they always giving negative feedback about people, or do they give positive feedback and say, oh, that person's really good at this. I don't know if that's the right role for him. I think he'd do much better here. That's different than, oh yeah, he sucks. That's why when I was in that position, like, okay, I got a toxic person. That's all I need to know. I can ask a few of those questions. Tell me about the people that work alongside you. I'll give you some praise and see how you take it. Do you just like, yeah, I'm really good, thanks. Or do you say, hey, I was part of a team effort, but I appreciate the acknowledgement. Like, okay, so he's sharing some of that. So you gotta yeah, I don't remember any of the other ones. Just kind of the first two that kind of pop in my head. But doing those, gotta have those one-on-one conversations. Gotta sit down with people, 30 minutes, give them once a month, and have those conversations. And you'll find it pretty quick, and you're gonna save yourself a lot of money.
It almost sounds to me like these are hygiene factors for somebody, as you say, who's manager of managers. They're checking in on their ecosystem, so to speak, and getting a sense of what's going on beyond their immediate purview, where people might be telling them what they want to hear, right, or showing. Right?
Yeah. And that's a danger. The higher you get, the less pushback you will get on your ideas, and so you have to encourage it, and it's hard to do. It's hard to want to do that. It's hard to want to like encourage somebody to give you, to push back. But if you surround yourself with yes men, they're gonna let you make bad decisions and make mistakes, and then you're gonna look stupid, right? So that was one of the things I always bring my subordinate leaders in. So if I'm in a manager roles, right? So I bring my managers in and like, hey, look, you guys, you're gonna help me keep from doing something stupid. So when I say something stupid in this room, stop me and tell me that's stupid, and then we'll figure it out from there. And sometimes I'll come up with an idea, and everyone's like, yeah, boss, that sounds good. And like, I don't want to hear that. I know it sounds good. I think it sounds. That's why I said it, because I think it's good. Like, I don't need you to tell me it's good. I need you to tell me how is this going to go wrong. So that's why I'm talking to you about it. Otherwise, I just do it. So I'm here to hear from you. How is this going to go wrong, so that we can either prepare or not do this. So let's talk about that. And so that'll keep you from making a lot of dumb decisions in that too. So having those conversations and encouraging that pushback from people too.
Right. And if anybody's listening who isn't a manager of managers but has a toxic boss, do you have any advice for them when they're in that situation?
Well, it depends on how toxic that person is, right? And what kind of relationship they have with the senior leader. So honestly, I don't think that as a subordinate with somebody who's actually toxic, who's like fundamentally so that they don't care about you, there's very little that you can do as a subordinate to train them out of that, because they don't value your opinion. And so, they're as coordination, when you tell them, so there's there's some techniques where you can kind of like in the Matrix, avoid the bullets. And that's just where I had one where I just convinced them that all of my ideas were his ideas. So that's how I would get my stuff taken care of. And I'd say, hey, boss, you remember when you said such and such? Is this kind of what you were talking about? Because that seemed like a really great idea. So I ran with it and I came up with this. Like, oh, yeah, that's exactly what I meant. Like, all right, cool, thanks. And so it was a little manipulative, but I understood like that's just how I survived with individual, and avoiding that conflict. So the conflict isn't going to get you anywhere. And so if it's something that you just can't get past anymore, there's human resources, there's their boss with who they will listen to, unless that person's toxic too. And there's also a resume that you can dust off, go somewhere else, and avoid that again in the future. So I have done all of those. Well, I've never gone to the human resources thing. I have done the avoidance of conflict by some manipulation. It's hard for me to say, but that's really what I was doing. I was manipulating their personality and the circumstances. I've gone to the 2 levels up. I've done that as well. I've done the confrontation thing, and it didn't go well for me. Um, so I won't recommend it. Eventually I got moved because I almost got into a fist fight with a fellow officer in the military who outran. Yeah, and it was one of those, we were on opposite sides of the desk, and you stay on the other side of that desk before both of us get in a lot of trouble. And really, it was me that was getting in a lot of trouble. That was kind of a stupid move, but hey, I was a young kid. But so I don't recommend that course of action. It's a tough situation. It is. It's really hard, and it's hard to, the nuance of each of these relationships is really what makes, it's hard to say, hey, if you do this every time it'll work, because it may not. It may not always work, and sometimes you do just have to leave. That kind of sucks. To uproot and go somewhere else, and but that may just be your only option, based on the environment that you're in. And I don't know. It's hard to give a one size kind of answer to that. I've tried a lot of techniques to varying degrees of success.
Yeah, no, yeah, but there may be some pointers in there for people listening who are in that position. Sure. Yeah, no, so that's useful. Okay, we go for an hour now, and I really appreciated the conversation. There's been tons of insight here.
Fun. Yeah.
And so for people who want to learn more, so there's you're offering an online program. Is that live now for people?
Yeah, so it's for businesses in particular, so if you're an individual that wants to get better, we could just chat, right? And I'll talk to you, and you can ask questions, and we'll do that. It's not really a program for individual people. It's kind of designed for a larger organization. If you've got 1,000 employees or so, and you wanna fundamentally change your leadership culture, or maybe not fundamentally, but improve your leadership culture, and improve your training that you already have established, then you're kind of the client that I'm looking for. Right. If you're smaller than that, or you're just an individual that wants to get better, then let's just chat. So let's talk. I'm not, individual people that want to do better. To me, it just kind of feels weird selling them a course. Like, let's just talk, man, and let's go through your issue, and part of the design of my course is having that mentorship of individuals, right? So not one size isn't going to fit everybody. I can't just give you one tip and say this is going to be successful every time. It's not like welding, right? I could show you how to weld, and that's how you do this type of weld, right? So people are very complicated creatures, and there's a lot of nuance, and there's a lot of ambiguity. So but my thing is establishing kind of mindset principles of governing left and right limits that you can operate inside of. So those are good for an organization, and then when you have that mentorship inside the organization, that's where you're pushing it forward. Right? For individuals, just hit me up and let's chat.
Right. And that's Louis J Fernandez.com.
Yes. I wasn't sure if you wanted me to jump in there or
not. Yeah. So, and we'll put the link in the description.
Yeah, I'm also very active on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So if you want to engage with me there, that's a really great spot to find me right now. So I'm on there every day, pretty much.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, thank you very much for my first interview from a car. And it turned out just fine.
A mobile sound booth.
Yeah, exactly. The perfect studio. Right. All right. Yeah. Well, enjoy the rest of your morning. There's a lot left of it. So
there is. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Have a great day.
All right. You too, man. Take care.
Thanks, Louis. Thank you. Bye.